Awesome. We are live. Let's get all of Instagram going live.
All right. Oops.
Get Okay.
Hold on. There we go. There's the go live button. Ah,
Hold on. It hasn't. Instagram. Okay, there we go. Awesome. How are you, my dear? Welcome to another Monday episode. I'm excited for tonight.
absolutely. So we are streaming on 4 different Facebook pages, 2 Instagram pages. We also are on Spotify and Apple Podcast, as well as iHeartRadio. What did I miss?
Twitch. We've got
Twitch.
the fans over there on Twitch
There we
following along
go.
as well. So, yes, we are on 8 different platforms, and I am so excited for tonight. We do have a special guest. So, if you are loving what you're hearing, make sure you end up in whichever platform you're on. You're giving us the thumbs up, you're giving some hearts, some loves to our guest. Because you guys are in for a good old treat. Love our guest tonight, but just a little background. So the guest tonight is Marty Kendall. He is a engineer revolutionizing nutrition. I've followed quite a while and been in a couple of his groups, which he is using the data driven. So many of you that have followed me on Instagram know that I'm kind of a data nerd when it comes to my tracking and stuff. But his approach is also nutrient first, and that's where we kind of align in the BNC community, even though we are beyond nutrition focus, nutrient focus is still in there as well. And his interest began to, it aligns really with a lot of us, right? Our interest and our passion began with either helping ourselves or helping someone close to us. And I know, Sherry, that was part of your approach too, was to help your health and regain that control.
Absolutely. And it was a very, very long journey. It took me about 21, 22 months um and to get to where I had to look deeper and go beyond nutrition. Nutrition did things so far, and I still watch my nutrition, but I had to do the beyonds, and that's really where we're wanting to reach out and help people. I mean, our podcast is called Healing the Whole Body. So, uh, you know, we love it when we have guests coming on. So, what do you think, Becky? Should we drum roll and bring Marty on?
Absolutely. Bring him on and he can give us his story. Welcome, Marty. I
Welcome,
know
Hey
you
Marty.
guys.
came to this by way of wanting to help your wife gain
Yeah.
control of her type 1 diabetes, which is we have several listeners also that and or community members that are type 1 and have been able to reverse that. So
Yep.
it's definitely, a focus out that needs to end up and be out there, right? Because many people that are diagnosed type 1, type 2, type 1 is a little bit different, right? They're going to need that. But there are things and approaches that they can do that can help them to lose weight, can help them to reverse that amount of insulin that they need and really
Definitely.
reclaim their health. So without me, continuing to babble about your background, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, engineer 22 years ago, married Monica, married well, married lucky, and we didn't know anything about diabetes back then, like a lot of people don't. It's still a bit of a mysterious thing to a lot of people, and how to control blood sugar and insulin. And I met a doctor, fortunately, who just sort of unveiled it as a numbers game, and I understood, this is just all about numbers. I'm an engineer. I can hack this, and initially looked at, the balance of food and insulin and blood sugars and how to tweak blood sugars and reduce body's insulin requirements and stabilize the blood sugars. But then it was like, let's look at nutrition, nutrient density, and since then it's gone on to be, how do we optimize nutrient density and satiety and the whole data-driven fasting thing, which is just using a blood sugar to guide when and what you eat, has changed my life a lot. And I get to do this full time, and I'm just just curious about numbers. Everything's a numbers game, and how can I quantify things to help people get precise, accurate, timely results rather than just throwing stuff at a wall, which I think is what a lot of people end up doing and trying anything and everything and go down a ton of dead ends. So I just want to be I suppose, the GPS, the Google Maps for nutrition of where are you now and where do you want to get to, and how do we do that precisely without having to go down all the dead ends. So that's my gig, and it's a whole lot of fun. Great to chat to you guys.
Well, we're happy to end up and have you here. And so tell us a little bit about, obviously, I'm sure you kind of eat similar.
Yep.
I know a lot of those foods, aren't always, looking more at like the nutrient dense, the bioavailable foods,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not always what mini type ones, like you said, carbs and cover is always the biggest thing in the diabetes world. And
Yeah.
it's so irritating. But how have you and Monica been able to change and adjust kind of what you've been consuming as
Yeah.
and helping her?
Yeah. For I suppose the general dietary advice for diabetics is just follow the mainstream dietary guidelines and dose for it, because that must be right. And we're all afraid of saturated fat or cholesterol or animal-based foods or something random that we should be afraid of. So we eat the ultra-processed, hyper-palatable, hyper-profitable garbage that everybody wants to sell us. So yeah, I've come to see the nutrition industry largely as a front for the big food companies that want to sell us the cheapest ingredients out there, which are a combination, all those foods in the center aisles with barcodes and ingredients that contain sugar, starch, and seed oils all mushed together to create things that are taste addictive but give you very little nutrition. So yeah, I suppose initially it was looking at the food insulin index and trying to reduce the amount of insulin over the short term money needed, which ended up being, low carb, low protein, high fat. But then looking at from a nutrient density standpoint, we still need amino acids, we still need our vitamins and minerals. So it's how do we balance that need to stabilize our blood sugars and insulin while still getting the nutrients, and finding that right balance between the extremes to make sure you get the best of both worlds, really. So that's been my experience for everybody, is that somebody's on that spectrum. They need, some people who just need to lose weight need to maximize the nutrient density and satiety. People managing type 1 diabetes just need to stabilize their blood sugars so they can be on the other end, the higher fat, don't fear protein, a lot of it is the animal-based seafood type foods.
We call that high fat adequate protein, because like you said, we still
Yeah,
end up need that protein, right? So it's not always
yeah,
about low or no. Now, yes, I do more of the fat fasting to give kind of, the body that energy source, if you will.
mm,
But the protein is still a important factor in there.
yeah, yeah,
And so yeah, we
yeah,
don't want to sound like, it's all fasting and that the bioavailable form of the nutrients
mm,
isn't important. But
yeah. And definitely the animal-based nutrients are often much more bioavailable. So a lot of things fall into place when people don't fear the meat and seafood and those sorts of things, and get the nutrients and particularly protein from that, and then a lot of energy comes along with that. So yeah, it's just about finding the right balance between nutrients and energy, depending on your goal and context.
mhm. And so with your data driven aspect,
Yep.
and more of the intuitive side, I know at one point it was, when the blood sugar gets below your point,
Mm.
that's when technically, and I could be like completely paraphrasing this, but when it gets, that's when, a person, but also on that intuitive side, because like you said, being stuck in like a rigid window or, a rigid
Yeah.
pattern, kind of explain briefly. I know like you have a whole program on it, but
Yeah, yeah. To back up, data driven fasting was something we kicked off about 4 years ago now. And after watching my wife and now my son's continuous glucose monitor and insulin. My son got diagnosed about 18 months ago as well. So I've got 2 CGMs to watch continually, and like intuitively for them, eating when their glucose is really high is a bad idea because they want to get the glucose down. So you really want to wait until your glucose gets to a lower level. But when the glucose is low, it's definitely time to eat. We control with type 1 exogenous insulin, but your body is doing that all the time for everybody who's got a functioning pancreas. So it sort of dawned on me to use glucose as a fuel gauge for everybody. And I put it out there as a blog post, and a lot of people started using it. And then we created an app and a program, and it's just sort of a lot of people jumped on because it's a really easy way to know, when do I need to eat? When do I not need to eat? When can I wait a little bit longer? When do I definitely need to eat now because my glucose is low? And as you mentioned, it becomes intuitive very quickly. People can calibrate their glucose versus their actual hunger. And then it becomes, I can eat a couple of times a day, 3 times a day. I'm no longer trying to fast for days or weeks at a time because I'm in touch with my true hunger signals. And whether it be extended fasting or hyperpalatable foods, people have lost sense, lost touch with their true hunger signals. So using a glucose to validate your hunger and calibrate your hunger is just sort of a short-term training wheels window that then you can go, I can understand what my body needs when it needs it, and I'm not afraid of food anymore. I can eat exactly when my body requires it.
So what about those people that when they do fasting, because normal body result should end up and be that the blood glucose does come down and the ketones go up. But I have seen people where the opposite is actually happening. It is too much of a stress, and I know my co-host is one of those. When she ends up and it doesn't matter whether she fasts 36 hours or whether she fasts 100 hours, that glucose is continuing to go up.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's definitely a reason for that. I mean, one aspect is, hey, as you mentioned, you get stressed. Your body goes, hey, it's time to eat. I'm getting anxious. I need to go out and find some food. I need to kill something. So it's time to eat. And if you wait too long, your glucose can go up. But at the same time, we also see insulin can drop when you get the ball rolling with the weight loss process. The constantly high insulin levels drop and starts to release energy from your body. So I suppose there's a bit of a balance there of, am I fasting too long, or do I just go, hey, let's roll with it because my body's dumping all that stored energy into my bloodstream and I'm not hungry, so I'm okay. But yeah, we designed data-driven fasting really to dial people back from the extended days at a time to let's try and eat a couple of times a day at least so they can get the nutrients they need each and every day, rather than I'm not eating for a week and then I'm going to eat. A lot of people end up binge eating at the end of that longer fast. So it's a matter of helping people find that balance point where they can get the nutrients they need while also losing weight and guiding that weight loss process.
With that process, are they also eating like early in the day, or are they fasting and then eating as the glucose? How, like I said, it's been a while since I've been in the Facebook group, because I personally noticed that my clients do better when they eat earlier in the day. It helps to control that blood sugar a little bit as well.
Yeah, definitely. Focusing on protein at your first meal is a good strategy. Whatever you call your first meal, it doesn't have to be at 6 a.m. when you wake up. It's just, when do I first feel hungry? A lot of people, that's 10, 11, 12. Due to dawn phenomenon, the glucose might be a little bit high, but that's okay. At that point, you've got plenty of glucose in your system. You've got plenty of fat probably in your blood as well because your body's mobilized it. with cortisol, adrenaline that happens as part of the normal circadian waking up process.
Mhm.
So what you need at that point is a good dose of protein first up, because your body's not hungry for energy necessarily. It's hungry for enough protein and nutrients. And then later on, people find the glucose drops and they can eat again when they're hungry. So yeah, definitely front loading your protein earlier in the day is a really handy hack for a lot of people, and gets them off that blood sugar roller coaster, and the blood sugar is stable for the rest of the day.
Yeah. And it truly does end up and make a difference when you put, that
Mm,
fatty protein first,
mm,
in that stabilizing aspect, right? It's not creating this up and
yeah,
down when they
yeah.
end up and, have other foods, or even just what is your, because I know what my opinion is, but what is your opinion on, like, we see a lot of like the protein sparing, we see a lot of like just eat, the lean protein. What is your research shown in regards of doing that with like blood sugars?
Yeah, I suppose it's a matter of finding the balance between the extremes. If you've got a lot of fat on your body that you want to lose, then maybe dialing back the dietary fat a little bit. But I think swinging to from one extreme to another is what usually leads people astray, because they go, 2 days a week I'm going to try a protein sparing modified fast, which is really extreme, and they don't adapt or deal well with that. So it's just a matter of finding the balance and dialing up the protein percentage incrementally. You still need your protein, but you want to dial back the energy from the fat and carbs enough to allow your body to use the stored energy. But if you're active and if you're eating a lot and you're trying to bulk up, then getting more energy from, for you guys it's going to be mostly fat, is a great idea. So yeah, just what's your context, what's your goal? As I mentioned before, it's sort of the GPS of, where are you now? Where do you want to go? Yeah, so I know that's a fairly controversial topic in some of this community of, is do we prioritize fat or do we prioritize protein? Yeah, yeah, I can talk about that more. There's a fascinating rabbit hole, but
It really is.
It is.
And absolutely, I mean, if you want to end up and discuss it more, because there's a lot of influencers out there also that will talk about like when we're fasting, our body is still getting protein, right? There's a big influencer in the fasting space that
yep,
says, we don't necessarily need that any of our body is actually, when it's creating the autophagy, it is breaking down these amino acids. We're getting it from
yeah,
other aspects of like the skin and this and that. And
yeah,
so, how much protein is enough and how much is, that's the other side of it, right? There's a huge debate in what is adequate protein. How do you determine what is adequate protein? Because these proteins that turn over when we're doing autophagy, but also, and if we're only eating 2 meals a day, are we going to end up and break down, muscle tissue? Are we going
mm,
to end up and eat the skin, right? That's one of the biggest things with
mm,
autophagy is the skin, the connective tissues, all of this. So what is your take on what is adequate
yeah.
protein?
Um, I've been looking at there's a concept called the protein leverage hypothesis. I don't know whether you guys are aware of it, with Professors Robin Harman Simpson in University of Sydney, who I've been chatting to recently about some of my data. And they sort of describe that your body, you crave food until you get enough protein, and regardless of whether you've got a very protein dilute diet, you'll have to eat more. And if you've got a higher protein percentage, you get enough protein without excess energy. But it's been fascinating to look at the data to see that each nutrient, particularly protein, follows a sort of a inverted U-shaped curve. So it seems, when we're below 12.5% protein, we crave higher protein foods. And it's if you're on a very low protein diet, less than say 8%, like a very low protein, very high fat ketogenic diet, you actually crave protein. So people don't feel satiated by higher protein foods. They actually feel, their appetite is stimulated because they're trying to get to that 12.5% is what the data shows. But then as you get to the other side, that protein leverage sort of kicks in where you get enough protein and you don't have to overconsume excess energy to get the protein you need. But then if you're push it way too far up, so you go from 10% to 50% protein, you're going to be craving energy, so you won't feel satiated there either. So in our macros masterclass, we sort of guide people to nudge their protein percentage up incrementally. They might start at 15% and, hey, let's try 20%, see how you feel. Are you making the weight loss progress you want to see? And if not, let's nudge it up a little bit. So you're just bumping the protein up just a little bit from where you started and the energy down just a little bit to make the progress you want to see. In terms of autophagy, I don't know. We can't measure autophagy in humans. It's just an impossible thing to measure, and you're going to get some beneficial autophagy after fasting for 2 weeks or whatever. But as soon as you eat again, that autophagy benefit is going to be deleted as soon as you rebound binge on whatever you're eating because you're so hungry. So the approach I just take, what we do know is having a better body composition, having a better balance of lean mass versus fat mass. We know that's healthy. We know that's good for longevity and all the other beneficial things. So let's get enough protein and a little bit less energy while we're losing weight. So as long as you're moving towards a better body composition, which is difficult, it's a challenge, but that's what the data shows. If you've got adequate lean mass, not excess fat mass, you're going to be healthier, regardless of whether autophagy happened in the meantime. I don't really understand autophagy, to be honest. And going back to the skin and, you've got, some people say you've got plenty of lean mass to break down. And that may be true in the first few weeks or months, but if you continually fast excessively, I think you're going to get to a point where you're going to lose that precious lean mass, and lean mass becomes really important later on in life. So if you lose excessive lean mass and your body's craving protein, you may end up being skinny fat. So do what you can all the way through to avoid being skinny fat at the end of the process. I don't know whether I offended anybody with that response, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts.
Nope. Not at all. I mean, I think, one of the things that we speak about in Beyond Nutrition is it's kind of an N equals one, right? We're all a little bit different. And so what we end up when we need, I get what you're saying. When I tend to be someone that thrives a little bit more on the higher fat side of things, but I'm more like at minimum 80-20.
Yep.
And I can kind of shift that, but very rarely, unless I'm doing, the fasting or fat fasting, am I less than that 8% that you were talking about. I don't know that many people need, right? If you go a 90-10, unless you have some condition, that needs that therapeutic side of ketosis, would I ever end up at say, right? That's where they end up need, but go ahead.
There's definitely people who need elevated ketones if you've got dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's and all those things that elevated ketone levels tend to help with. But I think for the people that come to us, a lot of the time they just want weight loss, and a lot of the time the weight loss, the stable blood sugars, the lowered insulin, the better body composition also aligns with all the mental health benefits. On that, back to the protein response curve, if you're down at 5 and 8% protein, people do tend to eat less at that point. There's a lot of interesting mice studies recently that showed that very low protein intakes, they just don't seem to eat as much. There's this 12% bliss point that the body seems to go, that's the ratio that we want to hit to maximize growth. So when we find those foods, it's usually the junk food, the Doritos, the croissants, those sorts of foods that have that perfect amount of protein that maximizes growth, and we just love to eat those foods and end up overeating them. So if you're on either side of that, you're going to eat less. But I suppose it's a matter of, is your body composition what it needs to be, what you want it to be. If you're lifting and want to retain your lean muscle mass, then maybe a little bit on the higher protein side. But 20% if you're lean is probably a great point to be. You look like you're at your optimal and thriving. So 20% protein would be perfect. If you've got a lot of 80% fat, if that's where you're sitting, then that's probably a good point for someone at maintenance.
So how would you end up, and I know anyone that is listening, he's got the programs, right? You can end up you can get the data driven fasting. I know you also have the macro
Yep.
program. What is it? Macro vitamin.
Yeah, we've got a data-driven fasting challenge, macros masterclass, and a micros masterclass. So the macros focus on satiety and the nutrients that align with greater satiety, and micros just shows you how to fill in all the other micronutrients from the food you eat.
So roughly, I know we kind of went over the fact of where a person should end up and be if they're looking for maintenance, right? Around that 20.
Yep.
But say they end up and they have weight to lose. Where would, in your opinion, where would their minimum be on protein ratios?
Yeah.
And I know there's also a question in the chat, but we'll come back to that.
Cool. I love the questions. I suppose for us, it's where are you at now? You talked about N equals 1 before, and everybody's body knows how much protein they need to maintain their current body composition and activity. And like Sean Baker's eating 40% protein and 520 grams of protein because he's a big dude. I've met him, and he's tall and he's solid and he's an alpha. And I go, wow, dude, you're really living the life. And because he's lifting so much, his body is going, give me the damn protein. So he's eating 520 grams of protein. I don't lift that much. I'm not that much of an alpha. And so I need a little bit less. But other people, the postmenopausal females that come to us are down the other end of the scale, and they need less protein, but maybe a higher percentage protein to get the balance of protein versus energy that they need. So all we do is say, for a week, what are you eating? If you're maintaining your weight, let's tweak that a little bit. So we've got a satiety algorithm that takes your current foods and say, let's eat a little bit of this, and this, and maybe a little less of this and this. And that just gives people a template using their current diet to tweak their macros, to tweak their foods using the foods they already know and love, to increase satiety. And people go, oh, wow, I can't eat all this food. It's so much extra food, but we've only tweaked a little bit. And that's sort of how it works is, you're not trying to limit calories. You're not actively trying to limit energy, but by changing what you eat, those foods naturally are more satisfying. They crush your cravings and they're harder to overeat.
What do you say to those people that, and I've heard this a lot with our clients and so forth lately, is I just want to chew.
In terms of when they're fasting or the food choices, or
both,
or
really.
a bored mouth. We don't see that a lot. Just like from a data-driven fasting point of view, people are they're eating multiple times a day, so they come from extended fasting, and we try to save people from the just fast for longer is better, and then they end up really hungry and skinny fat potentially. So they're really happy to come from that extended fasting to eating 2 or 3 times a day and making the progress they want to see. in the macros and micros masterclass, we're not particularly carnivores, so we've got a good amount of protein from meat and seafood. But if you're prioritizing potassium and calcium and these other things, you're getting a ton of dairy and potentially extra vegetables. So it's a large amount of food that they have to chew. So yeah, chewing is most people are going, how do I eat all this food? There's so much to chew through. It's a
I've
mountain of
heard that
food.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just need to find that balance, and we don't
Yeah.
care if you're carnivore or plant-based vegan for religious reasons. We just want to show you the nutrients and the algorithm, the way to increase your diet satiety value.
Yeah, and that is one of the biggest things, like you said, whether you're looking at the micronutrients of food, and one of the biggest things is like the electrolytes, right? I know you kind of go
Mm,
over the different foods to be
definitely,
able to get it
definitely.
in food wise versus just a supplement wise too.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. The particularly potassium, calcium, and sodium all are very dominant satiety factors in addition to protein. It just seems that our modern food system, we've grown the food more quickly, so you get more energy from the food, and the animals that eat that food that's been grown with fossil fuel fertilizers to get more energy in the grains or whatever. And then we go, okay, we've got nutrient deficiencies, so we're going to jam all these B vitamins and folate. But what is always left off that is, calcium, potassium, and protein. So our food system is devoid of that, and hence it shows up as those are the nutrients that we tend to be craving these days because they're just not even fortified or supplemented in our food system. So we need to work out how to get the calcium, which is often dairy, and protein, which is the meat and seafood, and potassium's quite a challenge for pretty much everybody.
And that's one of the things with getting, like you said, the volume, right? So there are times where my meals look different. For me, I eat more seasonally. So I may be more of that carnivore in the wintertime where, when summer and winter time, or fall time, I should say, not winter. Fall, I'm eating more of those carb foods, right? And the volume of that food is going to look different because once I end up and I trigger that hunger or get to below the trigger, right, then it's time to end up and eat a meal. So eating that robust meal. But the other thing, and you kind of started to say this, when people are pushing through a fast and then they end up and they have the binge on the hindsight of it, right? They're overeating, they're triggering it too much, because then by the time they get to their trigger point again, and by trigger point, what we're referring to for anyone that hasn't ever done the DDF, it's that point where your blood glucose is low enough. um, Go ahead.
Yeah. So just to define the trigger, it's just the average of your pre-meal glucose over 3 days, and that's different for everybody. So people with type 2 diabetes come into our challenges with glucose at 200, and they start at 200 and work their way down. And it's just like a progressive overload system that just pushes you a little bit further as your metabolism improves, as you lose weight, your glucose drops. So we push you just a little bit harder week by week to help you keep making progress. But if you're metabolically healthy, then your trigger might be 90 and it'll drop just a little bit. It'll never go to zero because your body always wants some glucose in the system. But on the circannual eating, I find that area completely fascinating. You talked about, in winter I'm eating this, and you talked about the protein sparing modified fast before. But I think I see the different dietary camps as sort of a circannual cycle of winter is the low carb, spring is really the protein sparing modified fast with fiber and protein because you're going to have new shoots and lean animals after winter. Summer, people, a lot of people do eat carbs and thrive, but then it's the autumn that trips us up. It's this combination of fat and carbs that is really rare. It's only available for a short amount of time, but a modern food system has realized that, we sell more, we eat more of these foods that are fat carb combos together that never happen in nature, because we've got fat energy in winter and carb energy in summer, but everything in our modern food system is a combo of fat, carbs in unnatural ways. And even the types of fat, you get saturated fat from animals and monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fat from plants. And one or the other is not necessarily bad, but when you combine them both with sugar and starch, you're looking at the Mars bar and the Dorito and the croissant, and they're the things that we can't stop eating. It's not just one macronutrient or even type of fat or type of carbs. There's something in our brain that when it gets, polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and saturated fat, and sugar and starch, and a little bit of protein, our brains just light up, and we get this dopamine overdrive that we can't stop eating these foods. So as long as you move away from those ultra processed foods that have been designed to trigger that binge response, that hyper super physiological dopamine response, we're going to improve. So moving around to winter with the low carb fat fueled approach is it's what works so well. You're moving out of that autumnal zone that we're stuck in 365 24/7.
Well, and they, like you said, they've designed it to end up and hit that bliss point. So
Yep.
we continue to end up and crave it, right? It's
Yeah.
but like you said, learning to do it more on a cyclic. I end up and I say consistency with variation, and people are like, "What in the hell are you talking about?" Right? Because it's like two opposites, and I understand that. But we also when we are fully aligned, we're not meant to eat the same food 365, 366 days out of the year. There should be this algorithm, if you will, as far as the way we end up when we rotate it, to one, feel satisfied, but also not necessarily have the hunger after a meal. And that's where people that are getting empty energy, they're not hitting that satiety point. And like you said, the Mars bar or, whatever, it's just an empty nutrition. There's no nutrient value there. They've just figured out how to combine things to make us crave it. But
and from a seasonal point of view, you can think that those autumnal foods are telling your body that you've got to get fat to prepare for winter. So it effectively raises your set point and your body's craving more energy because the environment is telling you that you need to get fat. You need to fatten up like a bear preparing for winter, or you're going to not survive winter. So having those foods around you is just sending a signal to your brain that you need to keep eating. So it's really hard to win if you're surrounded by those foods. So just change your environment and your brain settles down.
Absolutely. And so the question that was in the chat was in regards to kind of something that we alluded to with the diabetes specifically, but and the increase in the glucose. Says, is he familiar with damage in the brain and the hormones due to high blood sugars? Obviously, that is type 3 diabetes, right?
Yeah. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. Insulin resistance in the brain. Basically, at that point, you can't get glucose into the brain as effectively to fuel your brain. So that's where the high fat, high ketone approach can be helpful. But if you're not at that dementia, Alzheimer's point, then dialing in body composition, which I see a lot of things through the lens of the personal fat threshold. Once you decrease your body fat, the fuel tanks in your body work more effectively, and everything you eat goes into storage rather than overflowing back into your bloodstream and being stored around your organs. So for most people, I think focusing on whatever leads to body composition leads to physical and mental health and longevity. So if you're at that point, then it's a different kettle of fish. But if you've caught yourself before you're in a nursing home with dementia and Alzheimer's, then focusing on things that'll improve your blood sugar and body composition is the way to go.
Which also ends up and kind of goes into, not only how are we able to, leverage this and getting those ketones and balancing the blood sugar and reversing this, but it also goes into the hormones and the body
Mm,
as a electrical being, right? And that's
mm,
where kind of the micronutrients versus the
yeah,
macro come into play. A lot of people are putting a lot of focus into sodium. We know this, right? There's a lot of talk about sodium, although I tend to end up and be more focused towards the potassium side of it,
Yes.
um,
mm,
which is beneficial for me because when I end up and I have this imbalance of sodium to potassium,
wow,
but
yeah,
there's also other micronutrients and minerals that we need to look at in order to get a full optimal intake. And I think, that is one of your courses as well is the
yeah.
micros. So,
Yeah. Fascinating. You mentioned the electrical signals, and because your body just turns the food energy into electrons with the electron transport chain, and that's the balance of sodium, potassium, and we've got this amazing conscious craving for sodium. So we all really get enough sodium most of the time because we're so programmed for it, and it's a dominant satiety factor. We're all trying to get to about 2.9 grams per 2,000 calories of sodium if our food is bland without salt. We're not eating enough salt. We'll crave salty foods, and that's why processed food manufacturers add fatty and carby foods with extra salt. They just know that we crave those foods, especially if we're low. But once we get over that peak and add too much salt, things will taste too salty and less appealing. So we'll eat less of those. So there's this amazing balance point and craving for sodium, but we don't have the same craving for potassium. So we're most of us are on the low side of potassium and need to find ways to get more from our diet or supplement because the electron transport chain is just this exchange of electrons inside and outside the cells between sodium and potassium. And if you're low on either, if you don't have that balance right, you're in trouble. I think a lot of the bad things about sodium are really an imbalance of the potassium sodium ratio. Most people need more potassium. They're probably getting enough sodium already.
yeah. Well, and that's where also several of the other, like I add a mineral resin, I add shilajit into, to get the full, like what, 84
Yep.
trace minerals
Yeah, wow.
that is in there. But also there's, other things like the iron, the selenium, the
Mm,
calcium that all
mm,
end up and go into this too.
yeah.
And helping
Which all
with
come from whole foods with
Mhm.
animals that are grazing naturally and getting those nutrients into their bodies that we eat. And our modern food system is devoid of all of those, not just the essential but the non-essential.
And so do you suggest that people take a electrolyte supplement, or would you rather them create their own? Like I have, potassium, I have magnesium, and sodium so that I have the ability to kind of manipulate how much is going into that because there's a lot of pre-mix electrolyte powders
Mm.
on the market right now.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, preference is first stop is to try and get it from food, and we try to, particularly in
Mhm.
the micros masterclass, guide people to make sure they're getting all the essential nutrients they need from food, and then they go, "Well, I don't need that supplement and that supplement, and look at all the money I'm saving from dialing back all the bottles of supplements that I never took anyway because I never, go, oh, great, let's take the 18 bottles of pills that I bought. I've got this drawer full of supplements that I never take, and they're 5 years old, and probably a waste of money if you can get it from food. But I have designed a electrolyte mix recipe that a lot of our optimizers use. That's potassium, calcium, and sodium. I sometimes put bicarb soda rather than the sea salt in there myself, and I'll throw that in my electrolyte mix with some creatine, which is flavored, which makes it taste pretty good overall, and that just makes the water more interesting. I know I'm getting my potassium and calcium and sodium. Oh, sorry, it's magnesium, no calcium. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and with that being said, so one of the biggest things that I see, especially with people that are fasting, and obviously it's not the main culprit, but in regards of the electrolytes and being
Mm,
able to put a higher potassium in there, it does help with being
mm,
able to kind of do the fasting and
mm,
ultimately helping to lose weight because it
mm.
has a large connection to that satiety response.
Yeah, definitely. The one time I fasted for 7 days, one thing I noticed is I was using an electrolyte powder, and it ran out at day 6, and after that, I felt like trash, and it was really hard to keep going on. And yeah, if you're fasting, then it's worth supplementing with some electrolytes. It'll help you get through it and not have the rebound binge at the end.
Yeah. So when
Yeah.
you end
Well,
up in, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to add to that wearing my CGM, that plain black coffee raised my
Yep.
glucose, my blood sugars. Like
Yep.
it was, I had to give up coffee. Um, but that's where I substituted it for the Shilajit.
Okay.
And that's what I drink now as my
Wow.
coffee. But
Wow.
I'm like Becky, where too much sodium, um, my blood pressure, right?
Yeah.
And that's a problem. I can
Yeah.
feel like my fingers swelling, things like that. So I have to do a higher potassium
Mm.
and lower that sodium down as well. And do you see that in a lot of the diabetics and the people that are postmenopausal women or anything like that? Do you see that?
Yeah. Not specifically, but I suppose my comment there is that I know LMNT has got a certain potassium sodium ratio that's designed for athletes, but ours is sort of more prioritized towards everybody else who's not a hard charging athlete that's sweating a lot, that, like you say, needs more potassium rather than sodium. Most people are getting enough sodium from their diet. They need to emphasize the potassium. So our mixed design has got a 3-to-1 potassium sodium ratio. So yeah, and our target for sodium is on the lower end, like at 4 grams per 2,000 calories, whereas our potassium target in our micros masterclass is a major stretch to get people up to a higher potassium level, because nobody's getting enough potassium, and there's a lot of research that shows that blood pressure and related issues are related to the potassium sodium balance, not just excess sodium. So I think you've got all these people who are trying to limit their sodium, and then the processed food manufacturer comes along and says we're going to lace all the ultra processed foods with sodium. So people are saying, oh, I've got to keep my sodium down at 1.5, and then the Doritos and the chips are salty, and they go, oh, I'm going to eat more of it. But what they really need is to, maybe they need to cut back the added sodium and not salt their food too much, but it's the potassium that is really the missing key to increase their potassium sodium ratio to improve their blood pressure, sorry.
And so when would you suggest someone to go about looking at, mixing their own, or if they're not that high intensity athlete, creating one that is more of like a potassium citrate, magnesium,
Yeah.
powder, salt, glycine. What's the other one you said? Creatine.
Yeah, you've memorized my recipe. This is great. Yeah, and
I told you
glycine
I've
and
been in your Facebook group for a while. So I mean that recipe was, oh man, it come out what,
it's been really
2 years
popular.
ago?
It's been insanely popular, that little optimized electrolyte recipe. If people track, I suppose people start to track their food in the macros and micros masterclass and go, wow, I'm low in this and this, and they take that as a stopgap and they feel a lot better, and they go, okay, now I understand the power of minerals. I'm addicted to this process. How can I get it from food? And the supplement sort of gets them all the way to optimal, where they can't get that from food all the time. It's possible. A lot of people do, and it's you can get all your nutrients from food. And we encourage people, we guide people. I think we're the only people that really have a structured approach to get all your micronutrients from food, while everybody's struggling to meet the minimum. We're striving for optimal, and got all these people competing and having a whole lot of fun competing for a diet quality score. So I'm going around in circles here, but supplementing if you can't get it from food is a good idea.
Awesome. Yeah. So, is there anything that you would like to cover that we haven't covered? I'm just checking the chats because we are on several different platforms. So, I know there's several that are like, hello to you all. Marty is the blood sugar guru. He is excellent. If someone wants to take a first step, what would you end up and suggest that first step to be?
Yeah, a lot of people know me for the blood sugars and the data-driven fasting challenge, which is just the simplest way to start guiding your weight loss process and improving your metabolic health without tracking your food. So just a simple glucometer. We've got a data-driven fasting 101 challenge that people can grab a glucometer, get the app, and just learn how to start the process. And we've got a data-driven fasting challenge that holds people's hands through the process, which can be confusing if you're doing it by yourself. So we sort of step them through and guide them through all the things that they usually see. And most people do a couple of rounds of that and go, okay, my food, what I eat is important here. I know you tell me to prioritize protein and have protein forward meals and eat earlier in the day, but I need a bit more help. So they jump into the macros masterclass, which helps them increase the satiety value of their current foods by just nudging them rather than giving you a meal plan. We just look at what you're currently eating and nudge you in the right direction. And then wants to go, hey, that was fun. I really want to take it to the ultimate level. The macros masterclass just looks at all 34 micronutrients and how can we improve the nutrient density of your current food, not just for satiety, but for longevity, vitality, all the good things that come from getting all the nutrients you need from the food in the form that your body understands and the right ratios, rather than that pill of that drawer of supplements that you spent hundreds of dollars on that you never use anymore, like a lot of us do.
I shake my head because I just moved, and the amount of supplements that I threw out hurt because it was dollar signs and it was a lot. I should have taken a picture of the supplements I threw out. Like, it was incredibly
heartbreaking
shocking.
that you spent that much money.
I didn't let my husband see it. How's that? But it was shocking. I was actually on the phone with Becky going, oh, I found another bottle of this. Oh, I found another bottle of this. And it was like, holy cow. But there was a time where I bought into that, right? I bought into you have to have all these supplements in order to. Now, I take very little supplements, and it's only for a short amount of time when I do. That was very eye-opening when you have to throw out a lot of money.
I mean, supplements can be the icing on the cake or the stopgap if you can't get them from your diet. But getting them from your diet is going to be much, much, much better. You're getting them every day from all the food you eat. You're getting, as I said, protein, potassium, calcium. You can't really supplement calcium because it ends up in your arteries, not where you want it to be. But every podcast influencer has got affiliate code for this, that, and the other supplement that are really profitable, and that's where the money is in junk food and supplements, not whole food. And I'm the crazy guy trying to show people how to get their nutrients from food over in the corner, saying just eat better food. Here's the algorithm to do it. I don't care if you're a carnivore or vegan. Let's dial it in. Let's get the nutrients you need from food.
And that's where I have to give a shout out to your side of the world, because there's a company called Grassland Nutrition out of Australia that
Cool.
I get like the freeze dried fat, but I also end up and get the organs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, and create like my own little snack mix out of it.
Wow.
And able to get that organs, because it gives that, like we were saying, people want the chew, they want the crunch, they want, the texture aspect, and it'll still give me that crunch because it's freeze dried. So
you're actually chewing something and it's giving you the nutrition from real food that's convenient. Convenience is a big factor. So those easy, snacky things, everybody's saying, oh, I'm traveling, what do I eat? So those sort of things are ideal for that sort of purpose.
Yep, absolutely. But like I said, that is a Australian-based company. So like I said, have to give them a shout out since we are speaking to that side of the world. But yeah, anything else? I know you have your next DDF challenge coming up, honestly, the same day that I am doing my Fat Fast Masterclass, which is April 6th. So I will be doing the Fat Fast Masterclass, but the DDF challenge will begin that day. If someone, I can post a link after we finish this, but if someone wants to find that other than searching out the Data-Driven Fasting Facebook group, where can they end up and find information on that?
Yeah, I've got the Optimizing Nutrition blog, which is all my blog posts. But the coolest thing at the moment is our Mighty Network community, where we just ticked over 10,000 people. And it's a really cool community of people nerding out about how to improve their nutrition with food and optimizing their blood sugars. So we've got tons and tons and tons of free stuff. And then if you get bored of that, you can jump into a course and we can hold your hand through that. So I just love that community of people who are just getting results. It's nice to get off Twitter and Facebook and into this community of people who are just, let's help each other get results rather than arguing about all the minutiae. So if you go to our blog, Optimizing Nutrition, and go member login in the top right, you can jump straight into there and check out all the stuff.
Awesome.
Very good.
I know it's midday for you, unless my co-host has any other questions, or anyone that is listening. If you have any questions, whichever platform you may be listening on, feel free.
I'm checking to see if I've got, nope, I'm good on my platform. So
awesome. All righty.
Cool.
Well, Marty, I appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, pleasure. It's been great to chat. Thanks for the friendly chat, and thanks to everybody from all over the world on the infinite social media platforms that's been tuned in to watch. I have to get some tips on how to use StreamYard to stream to everything.
It makes it very handy because, like I said, we've got them over on our free BNC group. We've got it on the BNC page, Sherry's page, my coaching page, our Instagrams, and then of course our YouTube. So we're and Twitch. Don't forget our friends on Twitch. But yeah, we're definitely all over because we're just trying to share that message, broaden beyond just our BNC community, broaden beyond your Mighty Network. Those communities are great, but there's also people on these other platforms that can end up and use the help. And like you said, your group is free. Ours is very, inexpensive. It's less than $20 a month for someone to join it. So, and they get several meetings per week where we do groups. So
awesome.
It is amazing. You're out there doing wonderful things. We appreciate you. And thank you for coming on and keep sharing the message.
You.
It's been so much fun to meet you guys. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marty. And would love to have him back with his wife. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The wife is camera shy, but the son is a bit of an extrovert. So maybe we can get the son on to say hi and
There
tell
we
him
go.
about it. Tell us about his diabetes management.
T-
He just got his
take your-
driver's license. He just got his P plate. So just came back from me finally. After 3 tries, he got his license. So fingers crossed.
Awesome. All right.
All right.
Thanks,
so much,
Marty. I
guys.
know it's midday over there, so enjoy your day. And as you can see, it was
Thank
starting to
you.
get dark. I had to kick my light on, but we appreciate you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day.